Hi there, this is Floating in Books, and today I'm going to be doing my reading wrap-up for most of October and November. I am a month late, I'm very well aware. Let's get just to it so I can explain to you what's going on. So yeah, I'm a month late doing a wrap-up. I was gonna do it, but I was stuck in this behemoth of a novel, and I just wanted to be able to come on here and update you on it. And then I got ill, and I suddenly had a lot of time on my hands to try and, you know, read. So I finished it in a couple of days all of a sudden. Also, if the lighting looks a little weird in this video, that's because I have to film this with artificial lighting, because I'm filming this right after I got home from work. So yeah, this gloomy atmosphere, trust me, this is not going to be a regular thing. I just didn't have any time to film it any time else. But I didn't just read these 4 physical copies that I have here myself. I did read quite a bit more. So I'm just gonna go in chronological order and let you know which audiobooks, physical books I actually read, and some of the physical books I lent from friends and family. So I don't have those here, so I'll just pop a picture up on the screen so you can see. Now, I completely forgot whether I included this one in my last wrap-up, yes or no, but just in case, Olivie Blake's The Atlas 6 is one that I read, I think right after I did my last wrap-up, and I was like, I think I was in the midst of it actually by the time I posted that previous wrap-up. And this is something that's very hyped up on TikTok, and I had heard a lot of people talking about how great this was. It was self-published as an indie novel first, and then it was picked up by a major publisher. And so many people were loving so hard on this, saying how it was great dark academia, and I enjoyed this. And I think I enjoyed it enough to want to read the second book because it's part of a duology. But this is not deserving the hype, which is sort of what I have felt with a lot of hyped up dark academia books where I'm like, really? This is what we're hyping up? I can give you 10 recommendations that I would think fit the theme just as well and are much better executed. This has a lot of really interesting elements, but I feel that the way the story plays out, it's just a bit of a cop-out, and it's like the easy way out, which are choices that I wouldn't necessarily make. But the premise is indeed very interesting. The Atlas 6 refers to a couple of people who are, well, selected from like different magical backgrounds, who are exceptionally well at this, and they're gonna be joining the Library of Alexandria, is that the one? The Alexandrian Society, and they are selected to, for a year, work together, live together, do research together to enter this very exclusive society. But there is a bit of a catch, because there are more people selected than who end up being able to be part of this society, and they need to take some very tough decisions. And then it's about how do you, make those tough decisions, and also these people with all these special powers and magic systems that they gain control, like how does it all play out, and alliances and all that. So it's really interesting from that point of view, but I've said this many times before about multiple POV stories. I just don't love them because I much rather get into the head of one character and even be put on the wrong foot sometimes than get a book like this, which it's not that big, but we get point of views from each of the main characters. So there's so many different viewpoints that you need to take into account, and it just gets a little bit, I don't know, by trying to do everything, I feel the book doesn't do enough. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. It's okay. I enjoyed it. It's very entertaining. I can see why a lot of people love this, but for me personally, this is not where it's at. Then the second book that I finished is The Repairclub by Charles Dentex. This is a Dutch book that I borrowed from my mom, so I can't show you this in real life because I already gave it back to her. And this was something she was raving about because she read it in the springtime. She bought it for her birthday, or I got it for her, I don't know. She got it for her birthday, or around that time. And it's about a repair club. And what does that mean? Here in the Netherlands, we have a lot of these like get-togethers, like where you can bring your broken down toaster and then people will try and see if they can still fix it. So that's what a repair club is, and this book centers around these slightly elderly people who are all pensioners who are in this repair club, and the lead character of this repair club used to work for the Dutch intelligence services, and something comes back to haunt him from his past, and then these other three people get, caught up in the entire storyline there. So it was a very entertaining read. It's sort of like in the same vein of the Thursday Murder Club, I felt, where you get these like pensioners who are then really wise and they, help each other out, and they can do everything from surveillance to like, making sure that they can actually like stay hidden and like whatever. So it was like James Bond meets pensioners. And I thought it was very entertaining. Is it something I would ever read again? No. It was a very quick read. It's very action-packed and sort of like short sentences. And it was great to read another Dutch book again on the page. So did I tell you how many stars? I did give the Atlas Stars 4 stars. And I gave the Repairclub 3 stars. Then the next book I finished is Eigen Welzijn Eerst by Roxane van Iperen. This is another Dutch book, but I listened to this on audio. This is just something I have found. I prefer listening to nonfiction audiobooks. I just do. And this is sort of like an essay-like story of how the Dutch middle classes are trying to put themselves first, and that's the reason why so many problems have been created in our society today. And this was pretty interesting. I gave it 3 stars. It's not something I'd ever need to read again. I felt at some points it was a little too easy. It wasn't necessarily going as in-depth as I'd like it to, which is why I didn't give it any more stars, but I think it's a very important topic to know more about. And this like social critique is something that I definitely am interested in like listening to more. Then there's a book I read that's quite controversial because of the person who wrote it, which is Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling's latest Cormoran strike novel, The Ink Black Heart. This is the latest novel in the Cormoran strike series. I borrowed this from a friend because he had already finished it and was like, oh, you can borrow mine. And I was like, okay, that's great. I've read all the other books in this series, and that's why I wanted to read it. I also wanted to see what some of the controversy with this one was about. And I really enjoyed the story. I finished it in a matter of days, even though it was over 1,000 pages. It's easily the longest novel I read all year. Could it have been edited down? For sure. It's about 400 pages too long. There are a couple of parts, especially in the middle of the story, where I feel we're taking too many twists and turns, and then the wrap up happens in about 20 pages and you're like, wait, was that it? So it's something that I'm like, that could have been done better, but I again feel there's quite a lot of social critique in this. It's definitely tapping into like fan culture and incels and online fan communities, and I thought that was really interesting because I used to be a Backstreet Boys fan, so I've been on these fan message boards and I was part of the core of that fandom for such a long time, so I know how fans communicate, and I felt that was really well done in this story. The only thing that might get annoying if you were to think of reading this book is that you do need to be aware that parts of the story are sort of formatted as chat messages going back and forth between members of an online game, and you just get to see their chat screens rather than it being continuing prose, which might make some people like turn off some people because it's a bit of an unconventional style of telling your story. But those were parts that I really enjoyed, and I thought in the end it was a really nice one. We get a lot of banter again between Cormoran and Robin, and that's what I'm here for. It's one of those will they, won't they kind of romance stories. Like, are they gonna end up together? Who knows? And I'm still hoping that they will, because I think they would be a good pair together. For me, that was 4 stars. Then one of my least favorite books of all year was another audiobook, The Human Design It's a Dutch audiobook by Guido, Wernink and Leers. So I started hearing in my Facebook feed from some people about human design, and I had never heard of it. So I was hoping that this book could give me some more information on what it is and how it entails. And it has to do with, like, I think your zodiac sign and the time you're born and whatever, like how you are then supposed to be as a person. It sounds really interesting, but this story was just one big anecdote of why these people who wrote it support the concept of human design, but there's very little explanation of what human design actually is and how you can apply it to your life, which is what I thought it was gonna do. So for me, I came in with the wrong expectations perhaps, but this was just a bit nah. So that's why it's only 2 stars. More audiobooks. I'm really into my audiobooks at the moment. And this is a book I heard a lot of people raving about. This is Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. Now, I wasn't an avid Nickelodeon watcher, so I've never watched any of the shows that she was on as a tween and teen star, because it definitely goes into her career of, you know, making Nickelodeon when she was a very young child and how her mother was sort of part of this whole scheme of trying to get her to become famous and all the insecurities that she then had to deal with as a consequence of her mom pushing her and her not really ever being able to be who she was. This was a really interesting read. I can see why this is at the top of the list of some of the Goodreads awards that I saw coming by. Is this a book that I feel is mind-breaking? No, but it's definitely heartbreaking because you get to see sort of the behind the scenes of someone who's trying to make it big in the showbiz industry and all the trials and errors, trials and tribulations, I should say, that she has to deal with, even when she is at an age where she cannot fully understand what that means, including all the eating disorders and other, like, mental health issues that she then has to deal with later in life. So, important read, yes. The writing style was often a little too simplistic, and that sort of made me lose the track, especially because I was listening to it in audio, which is why I gave it 3 stars. Another audiobook. I promise we only have 2 more left. This is Fokking Druk by Thijs Launspach. This is another Dutch one. And this is about anti-stress and mental health and anti-burnout. Like, how can you avoid becoming too stressed out? And a lot of it was things I already knew. But it was a short one and it was pretty engaging. I'm actually currently listening to another one of his books, which is much more like a continuation of what the points he's already trying to make in this one. And I thought it was, you know, if you're Dutch and you want a one-stop shop that isn't too long about like dealing with stress and mental health, then I think it's a good one. I gave it 3 stars. It was pretty enjoyable. And then the final audiobook I listened to is Damnation Island, which is by Stacy Horn, and this is a historical nonfiction book about Roosevelt Island. Roosevelt Island was pretty much turned into this place where they would send all the people they didn't want in New York society. So it had prisons and mental asylums and orphanages and all that jazz. So this book details, I feel in a little too much detail, exactly what was going on in like 19th century Roosevelt Island and what was going on there. It goes into some very, very specific cases, and that was what made it a bit boring at times. Like sometimes you're like, okay, I know this now. Plus, the narrator of this audiobook wasn't the best. I got fed up with her voice too easily, which made me stop listening to it at times. But the story, like the history itself, was really interesting. And I think I went to Roosevelt Island once, and the ruins of the asylum that they had there is still there. I think it was a smallpox hospital as well. Like, it was a whole thing. So again, an important piece of information that I'm glad I was able to listen to, but nothing too exciting. So a 3-star read for me. And then we get to the final things. I'm gonna just end on the high note. This is no longer in chronological order, but I was waiting for my friend. I had a sort of late birthday party in November. My birthday's in July, but I had just finished renovating my house, and I didn't want to have a lot of people over as part of that whole thing. So I told my friends, we'll do something in the fall time. So they came by and they gifted me the next 2 books in the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. and the second book was on back order, so they still were going to give it to me. And after reading the book I'm going to show you last, I was like, I need a palate cleanser, so I wanted to read that next. So while I was waiting for my friend to give me that book, I read these two, which are two of my childhood favorites. A couple of years ago, I've made a point of repurchasing some secondhand childhood favorite books to see how I feel about them now. And this was my favorite series growing up. It's Hotel Rozenbottel by Marjo Roeven. This is Dutch. I don't think it was ever translated. Not a lot of people on Goodreads have read it. And these are the final two books in the series. This is about a trio of girls who, one of them lives in this old house. It's actually on the back here. That is a hotel that is run by her family, and her two best friends come over to stay with her and do some chores for their summer break every time. And then they have all these little adventures. It's like adventure books for girls. And I really enjoyed them. Again, like, they're very easy to read, of course, and everything, of course, is nicely wrapped up with a bow in the end. They're children's stories, so what else do we expect? But these were really enjoyable reads. I had a lot of fun reading these again, and I really liked that I sort of recognize, because of these books, what I like now in a lot of the books that I read. There's little to no romance. In fact, the main character's older sister is someone who's very much in love with boys and like trying to make eyes with them and like, ooh, like swooning over things and like doing makeup. And I was never that kind of girl. So I understand now why I like these so much, because it's almost like tomboyish, where they just have these adventures and, you know, they go out swimming, and then there's like, they get trapped somewhere, and it's like all these kind of things, and like mysteries that they have to try and solve. So I feel that these books kind of were really an instigator of a lot of the things I like now as an adult. I still don't love books that have a lot of romance in it, and I really was like that when I was a child, so that's very telling. So yeah, I think I gave these 3 stars. I mean, they're very easy, both of them. I think I read both of these in a day. And finally, this is the big one, the thing that stumped me why I didn't do a reading wrap-up in November, and it's Brandon Sanderson's The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. And I had never read this, and because so many people who love fantasy keep raving about Brandon Sanderson books, I was like, I have to start somewhere. And I thought I might as well start here, because this is what a lot of people recommend you do when you start reading Brandon Sanderson. I have the rest of the trilogy as well, and I was like, is this it for the majority of the book? So in case you don't know what this is about, this is a heist sort of novel, in the first one at least, where in this fantasy world where people can do magic using different metals if they ingest them. And if you can ingest more than one metal, you are Mistborn. And it's this very desolate place where there's this dark ruler who's been, who's immortal, and he's been ruling for a millennia. And people have almost forgotten what it's like to be happy and to have hope and to have a better life for themselves. And this book is very much centered around like taking back control and sort of bringing the people something new, and that's sort of what we get in this first novel. And for 2/3 of the book, I just didn't get the hype. I was like, what's going on here? What? Why is everybody so in love with it? And then I got to the final 200 pages, and I was like, I get it. I get it. I gave this 5 stars because now that I've finished reading it, I want to go back and read the whole thing again, even though the first 400 pages is nothing but super repetitive dialogue, or so it seems, and details where you're like, why does this matter? It all matters in the end, and by the end of the book, you're left wondering, wait, didn't they say earlier in the book that this? And wasn't it like this early? It's a fantasy book that made me think, and that makes me want to go back to it to just see how it all unfolds, because this is one of those stories that places all of these little nuggets throughout the first 400 pages, and then in the final 200, it all comes together and everything starts making sense. And I was like, oh, thank thank you. So now I get the hype. Now I really want to go back into this story and go on with book number 2 ASAP. But like I said, this was such a chore to read, as in it felt long-winded, it was too detailed, I couldn't really get into it at first. But yet it was so rewarding in the end that I was like, if I'm gonna go straight into book 2, I think my brain can't deal with that. So I'm gonna go and sort of read something a bit more simplistic first, and then during Christmas break, I'll pick up number 2 in this series, and then I will definitely be continuing on with the series. It was excellent. I completely get the hype now. I totally understand why everybody's hyping up Brandon Sanderson, and just based on this one book alone, I now want to read his entire catalog. I just do. So that's it. Those are all the books I finished right now. I'm still in the midst of a couple of books, but I won't be doing another reading wrap-up anytime soon. I think I'll do one again at like the end of January or maybe early February, something along those lines, when I feel I have read enough. And that's the thing. I thought in November that I just hadn't read that much, but then I was prepping for this video and going through Goodreads to see what I had actually finished. I was like, oh, there's actually quite a lot here. I'm not quite going to be making my Goodreads end of year goal, which was 50 books, but I think that a comfortable 42-ish should definitely work out for sure. So I'll also post some content in January where I look back at my 2022 reading year, show you some stats, do all that, but I didn't keep track of it the way I normally do in other years, so it's going to be a bit of a, well, a bit more of a loosely filled video than I would normally have, because I accidentally deleted my reading log for my computer. So I need to find a new one for 2023 so I can have some more stats than just what Goodreads give me. So yeah, you can expect me to read a lot more in the upcoming weeks, so definitely stay tuned for that. I make one video on here every single week. I was ill last week, which is why I didn't post anything then. But yeah, I will be back very, very soon, and I'm gonna do like an end of year favorites for this channel as well. I'm also doing it for makeup on my main channel, but here as well, I will be sharing with you my favorite books, media, like movies, TV series, and music albums even for this year as well. So that's what you can look forward to next week, so I hope you'd like to stay tuned for that. And then for now, all I can say is bye, happy holidays if you are celebrating, and then I hope to see you again then. Bye-bye!